in this equation, this is a rational coefficient one-step equation. So what we are going to do is get rid of the 3 over 8 to get r by itself, because the goal of all equations is to get the variable by itself so you can solve for it. In order to do so in this equation, we have to get rid of the 3 over 8. Okay? So how are we going to do that? Well, let's think about this. We know that 3 over 8r is the same as 3 over 8 times r. Okay, that's multiplication. We use an inverse operation to get rid of the coefficient. So what is our inverse operation of multiplication? The opposite of multiplication is division. So we have to divide both sides by 3 over 8 to get r by itself. So when we are solving an equation and we have a fraction, to divide it, we flip and multiply. Okay, so we're going to flip and multiply. So I like to rewrite my equation. 3 over 8r equals 15 over 16. Now, I'm going to flip and multiply. So I multiply 8 over 3. And what I do to one side, I must do to the other side. So I multiply 8 over 3. Now, this all just cancels itself out, okay? Multiplying a number by a fraction by its inverse, it becomes 1, okay? Because you would have gotten 24 over 24, which equals 1. So it cancels itself out, and r is by itself. So I bring down r. Now to find for r, I have to multiply 15 over 16 by 8 over 3. So I multiply across. I multiply 15 times 8 over 16 times 3. Now, what does that equal? Well, 15 times 8 is 120, and 16 times 3 is 48. So, how do I break this down? This is an improper fraction, and it can be reduced. Well, I know that 24 divides into both of these numbers. So, r equals 120 over 48. Well, if I divide both of these numbers, my numerator and my denominator, by 24, I go ahead and I get 5 over 2, because 120 divided by 24 is 5, and 48 divided by 24 is 2. This is still an improper fraction, but it means the same as 2 divides into 5. How many times does 2 divide into 5? 2 1/2 times. So, I just go ahead and I rewrite r equals 2 over 1/2. I have my answer, but did I check my work? No. So I substitute r with my new value of 2 1/2. To do that, I'm going to use my improper fraction because it will be easier to multiply. So I have 3 over 8, and I want to multiply it by my answer, which is 5 over 2, or also 2 1/2. So I want to make sure it equals 15 over 16. So 3 times 5 over 8 times 2 must equal 15 over 16. Well, what's 3 times 5? 15. And what is 8 times 2? 16. Does 15 over 16 equal 15 over 16? Absolutely it does. It is true on both sides. So let's just go over the steps one more time. I took my coefficient, which is the number in front of my variable, and I flipped it and I multiplied it. I flipped it over to 8 over 3, and I multiplied it on this side, and what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I multiplied it on both sides. It cancels out on this side, and r is found by itself. I still have to do this side though. So 15 times 8 is 120, and 16 times 3 is 48. So I now have 120 over 48. This is an improper fraction that needs to be reduced. I reduce it down to 5 over 2, which I know is 2 1/2. So r equals 2 1/2. And then I plug it back in. I plug it in to make sure that my equation is true.